Hey guys, it's Jiggliepoof here. So today I wanted to tell you guys the story of how and why I went vegan, because I get asked this question so often, so I thought I'd just make a video on it just to clear up any questions that you guys might have around veganism in general and my specific story as well. So growing up I was always an animal lover. I always loved cats and dogs, and I had a dog growing up that was like my best friend. And so I always saw animals on the same level that I saw humans, and I always loved animals' nature and how gentle and sweet they are, and I just always had a connection to animals. I mean, my favourite thing, or my dream as a child, was to be able to speak to animals, because they were more my friends than people were growing up. So naturally, being so close to animals all the time and being such a lover of them, I always found it quite strange that people ate animals, especially considering that a lot of the animals that we eat are very similar to dogs and very similar to the dog that I loved so dearly, and they looked pretty similar. And I was fortunate enough as a kid to hang around goats and cows on occasion, and I saw how similar they were to my dog, so it kind of made it feel weird that we were eating these animals that were so gentle and kind-natured and so similar to members of our family basically. So when I was quite young I gave up eating meat for those ethical reasons. I just found it quite strange, like I said. So when I was in my early teen years I started eating meat, and that went really well, and I really became quite a passion of mine to try and save as many animals as I could by being vegetarian and by spreading vegetarianism as far as I could. And so naturally, after I got my degree in marketing, I wanted to work for a company that aligned with these values and where I felt like I could spread these passions as far as I could in my work life as well as my personal life, so that I could try and save animals and sort of make the world a better place. So after I studied, I went and worked at a company called Fries. They're a South African, proudly vegan company that makes meat alternatives like vegetarian burgers and sausages and nuggets. I've shown you guys some of their products on my channel before. So when I started working at Fries, I was quite shocked by how many vegans there were working there. I mean, obviously I knew about veganism before that, and it was something that I was really interested in, but I'd never actually met a real life vegan. So I didn't know much about it. I didn't know how healthy it was. I just assumed it wasn't healthy considering how few vegans there were and the bad rep that veganism had at the time. So I was quite shocked to find so many vegans working there. And working at Fries, the people there really opened my eyes to how terrible the dairy and egg industry is as well, because I always assumed that the baddie was the meat industry, but in actuality the dairy and egg industries are pretty much just as bad. For example, a lot of people think that cows just naturally produce milk, which obviously is quite absurd, because they're mammals just like us, and the only way that we produce milk is when we're pregnant, or sorry, when we've just given birth. So obviously cows will work in the same way, and basically to make cows able to produce the amount of milk that the dairy industry requires, they artificially inseminate these cows, and they basically rape them. They even call the rack that they put them on rape racks, for example, just to give you a brief example of how terrible the dairy industry can be. And then once their babies are born, their babies are taken away from them immediately, and it's a very traumatic experience for the poor cows. I mean, they do feel emotions just like we do, and often cows cry out and they get really emotionally damaged by the whole process. And then obviously after that they put straight onto milk racks where after their traumatic experience, they milked for their milk that was supposed to go to their baby. And then if the calf is born male, often they'll just be killed quite soon after their birth for veal, because male cows obviously aren't as profitable as female cows are in the dairy industry. I don't want to go into too much detail with the gory things in this video, because that's not what this video is about. It's just to give you guys a very brief example of why I made the decision to go from vegetarian to vegan. And then the egg industry, the hens that lay eggs are kept in these really small, terrible conditions usually, and they're often even de-beaked because they're kept so close to other chickens that they end up pecking each other and pecking themselves, so they get their beaks removed a lot of the time. And then male chicks that are born in the egg industry are also just ground up immediately, sometimes alive, because they're obviously not as profitable either as female chickens are. So these industries can really just be terrible, just almost worse sometimes than the meat industry in terms of like ethical values. I was always vegetarian, mostly just because I thought it was weird that we ate animals. I never even really looked into the environmental health and major ethical arguments for vegetarianism or veganism. And once I started going vegan, I really started looking into these things, and it really opened my eyes to how terrible the meat industry and dairy industry and egg industry really is. So from an environmental perspective, the vegan diet is probably the best and easiest way to reduce your impacts on the environment in terms of water depletion and climate change. For example, animal agriculture is responsible for something like 18% of all greenhouse gas emissions. I think that was in 2016, which is more than the total amount of gas emissions from the entire transportation industry. And then with regards to land, something like 45% of the world's land is taken up by livestock, which is a ridiculous amount considering that we're running out of land so quickly, which obviously also relates to deforestation, and a lot of forests are cut down to accommodate for this land that's needed for livestock. And then with regards to water wastage, a lot of water is used in the animal agricultural industry because it takes a lot more resources to produce a meat than it does to produce some plants, basically. So in order to produce meat, we have to produce plants to feed the animals for their life, as well as we need the water for them to actually drink. Then there's a lot of water that goes into cleaning. So there's a lot of water wastage in animal agriculture industry that isn't reflected in the growing of crops. So for example, it takes 95 litres of water to produce half a kg of wheat, whereas it takes 9,500 litres of water to produce half a kg of meat. So a person who follows a vegan diet for just 1 year saves 160,000 litres of water, 6,600 kgs of grain, 1,000 square meters of forest, and over 3,000 kgs of CO2. So that's obviously just a very summarized version of why vegan diets is better for the environment. But if you guys are interested in learning more, there's an abundance of information online. But I'd also recommend the documentary Cowspiracy to sort of get you started on learning more about how and why the meat industry is so bad for the environment. But I'll also link a few resources down below if you guys are interested in finding out more. And then from a health perspective, the vegan diet is well known to be a lot healthier than most diets around today. And the notion that you can become sort of malnourished on a vegan diet is quite an old-fashioned way of looking at things. Even our top sources for health research and recommendations across the world recommend a vegan diet these days, including Harvard and the World Health Organization, which is massive compared to the sort of flack that the vegans were getting a few years ago. And finally people are starting to actually put some money into the research, and the results are coming back in our favor. So in order to understand the health benefits of veganism, I obviously can't cover everything in this short little video, but before I start, I'd just like to recommend reading a few books on it if you are really interested, or I'll also link some channels below that are great sources of information. So in terms of books, the books that I've read and I've enjoyed are China Study, also How Not to Die by Michael Greger. And there's also, Michael Greger also has a great YouTube channel where he keeps you up to date with all the latest research with regards to plant-based diets and how to live healthier in general. I'll link his channel below. It's called nutritionalfacts.org. And then there's also great documentaries, of course, like Forks Over Knives, which is quite an old school documentary, but also very informative and great for learning more about the health aspects of veganism. And then there's a new one called What the Health, which is also great, definitely more controversial than the previous documentaries, but it's also a great one to check out. Let me just cover probably the most asked question I get around health first off the bat with veganism, and that is you can get enough protein on a vegan diet, trust me. Protein can be pretty much found in almost everything, first of all, and second of all, most people don't have an issue getting protein in their diet. Most people have actually 3 times the amount of protein in their diet than they actually need. And you can get protein from a range of different sources in a vegan diet, the best being beans and lentils. But there's a whole bunch of sources that you can get your protein from. Just Google it, it's quite widely available. So some of the health benefits of veganism are that it's known to lower your blood pressure, also your cholesterol levels, considering that cholesterol only comes from meat and it isn't found from plant-based sources. Being vegan also reduces your risk of many diseases, including cancer, diabetes, osteoporosis and Alzheimer's, but there's a whole bunch more, and I'll link to some of the sources down below as well for this. And then lastly, just from an ethical point of view as well, besides it's obviously being unethical to kill animals when we don't have to, but from an ethical point of view as well, we have such a huge problem with starvation in today's modern world, and it can be so easily sort of alleviated if we stopped feeding all of the food that we have readily available to livestock that we kill. A whole 3.5 billion more people could live off of the grain that we feed to livestock, which is unbelievably unethical to me, that we are feeding livestock the food that we should be feeding to the poor in order so that we can eat something that we like the taste of even though we don't need it. It just blows my mind that we're doing this. And another thing that really gets to me is that 56 billion animals are killed every single year for human consumption, and that excludes fish and marine life, which is like a crazy number if you think about it. It's worse than the Holocaust could ever have been, and we're killing this amount of like innocent lives every year and nothing is being done about it. And yeah, so sorry to end the video on that sad note, but the reality is that animals are suffering immensely on this planet, and for apparently no reason, because we don't need meat to survive and even thrive, and it's just a really sad thought to me. So yeah, that's all I have for this video, and that's why I'm so passionate about this topic. If you have any questions, obviously leave them in the comments below. I'll obviously link all the documentaries I've spoke about in the description, as well as videos, channels, resources, anything that you might need. But I'm always here for a chat if you're struggling with anything or if you have any questions. Just leave them below. But otherwise, I'll see you guys soon. Bye!